Executive function has been getting a lot of attention lately, and research indicates that students who direct their own activities actually have better academic outcomes. Is it possible that executive function is the critical missing link to higher student achievement? Let's see. Suppose you pushed open a door with such force that it swung back and punched a hole in the wall. And you decide you don't want to hire someone to fix it. Surely you can figure out how to patch a wall. So what do? You search the web and find a how-to sheet complete with steps, text directions, and pictures. All you have to do is follow these directions. Or maybe you head to YouTube and find a video of someone demonstrating how to patch and spackle a wall. Easy. I actually believe that most of what we need to learn today is on the internet, already available in some lesson form. And that goes for students too. The internet is filled with content that we once only taught in school. It's now there for students to use. But now let's look a little bit more closely at this process of learning. Which of these skills would you need to be able to follow a how-to sheet or a video in order to accomplish your goal? Yes, you would need every single one of these 9 skills. And these are just some of the dozens of executive function skills. I maintain that if you have strong executive function, you can learn any skill or concept. From a teacher, the internet, a book, a friend. Fundamentally, you have access to learning. Executive function provides you with access to learning. But if you lack executive function, the best lesson in the world will fall flat. The best textbook or website will fall short of the goal of having you learn. If we want students to achieve, we must focus on ensuring that they have strong executive function skills. Now, executive function skills are controlled by a small area in the front of the brain known as the prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain develops steadily after birth with a significant growth spurt, typically between the ages of 4 and 5. So what about those kindergarten students who come to school unable to focus, follow directions, or control their behavior? And what if that continues through the intermediate grades, middle school, and high school? Well, let's take a look at one key factor that can slow the growth of the prefrontal cortex and therefore rob students of executive function skills. Stress. The human body was designed to handle stress. Earliest man's stress was most likely from being chased by a wild animal. That's where our fight or flight response originates. Essentially, when faced with stress, the brain sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which in turn signals the adrenal cortex to pump out adrenaline and cortisol. Now, cortisol sends glucose to the large muscles so that you can fight or flee. But it also slows other bodily functions that aren't necessary when you're handling, say, a wild animal attack, such as digestion. Who needs to digest a meal if you're just trying to run or fight? And the prefrontal cortex growth. Who needs to handle higher order thinking and reasoning and organization and planning skills when you're just trying to run or fight? The problem is that the body does not know the difference between stress of being attacked by an animal and the stress of seeing your mom break down because she can't pay the bills, or the stress of living in poverty, being homeless, or moving from one home to the next in search of a place you can stay, or living under abuse, violence in the home, and so forth. Stress is stress, and the body keeps pumping out cortisol, except that your muscles don't need all of that sugar to fight or flee. So what are the long-term effects of chronic stress and increased levels of cortisol? Loss of brain cells, particularly in the prefrontal cortex. Memory problems, since working memory is an executive function. And slowing of the overall growth of the prefrontal cortex. These are the skills of executive function. Without these, you do not have access to learning, no matter how talented your teacher or how fantastic the instructional materials. Now think for a minute. As a teacher, if your principal brought a student into your classroom with a broken right arm in full cast, and that's the writing hand, would you attempt to try to get that student to hold a pen and write? Would you stand over that student and just tell him or her to try harder? Of course you wouldn't. So remember, the next time a student walks through your door lacking executive function, he or she potentially has a physiological deficit. Drawing attention to that or telling the student to try harder only exacerbates the problem. The good news, though, is that the brain is very malleable and it can improve under the right conditions. The more you exercise the skills of executive function, the stronger they become. The learner-active technology-infused classroom is a veritable playground for executive function. Let's take a look at some of the activities in which students engage in order to take charge of their own learning. Well, first of all, students use many executive function skills in order to self-assess and set goals. They exercise their higher-order reasoning skills in addition to many other executive function skills when they engage in problem solving. Scheduling and managing their own time requires several executive function skills, and the more students handle their own time, the better they become at it. Managing their own behavior and work habits through goal setting and self-assessment build executive function. And these are just a few of the ways that the learner-active technology-infused classroom builds executive function. I hope you're encouraged to know that all students can in fact learn at high levels. It's just a matter of ensuring that you're building executive function so that they have access to learning. And poverty is no excuse for lack of achievement. The brain can grow and flourish under the right conditions with the right teacher.